how many of us are living lives that don't match our personalities? And how do we go, where is God when he gives us a story that's different than maybe the one we think we really need to thrive?
That right there. Where is God when he gives us a story that's different than the one we think we need to thrive? That is amazing. Hey there, listen, if your life is anything like mine, you're constantly figuring out how to manage your schedule, take things off your schedule to make room for the things that need to be on your schedule. You might be finding that there's not enough time in the day to do the things that are really important to you, or there's just not enough day. You run out of day before you finish doing all the things that are on your list. Listen, I get it. One of the best things that you can ever do for yourself is to live within limits, to decide that we all have a 24-hour limitation. And because of the other things that go into our lives, whether they be kids or whether it's work or whether it's volunteering in the community or at your church, maybe it's a second job, maybe it's working out, maybe it's prayer and time in the Word, that there are other things that use up that 24. And so what are you supposed to do if you've got more to do than you have day? Well, the first thing that you want to do is recognize that there is a gift in limitation. And I want to talk to you more about that today with Miss Sara Hagerty. So Sara is one of these people, y'all, who I just look at her life and I know it's not perfect. None of our lives are perfect and none of our lives are totally smooth. But she has been given, I think, a unique gift of learning from the things that the world is not saying and then sharing that in a way that makes you go, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. This is an alternative. Sara, I'm glad you're here today. Thanks for joining me. And I want to just, for those who may not have heard of you before, and we've got another podcast where you've joined me. We'll link to that in the show notes. But just tell me a little bit about your family, about your life, about what kind of is the environment in which this latest message of your life that you've been writing down for us has been born.
Well, first, I have to say my husband showed up 10 minutes late to do the baton pass, and I drove what felt like 90 miles per hour to get home in time to do this.
Not you.
And was throwing the things together to be so it's funny that you introduced me that way, because if you had a window into my life 20 minutes ago, you would have thought I was crazy. I have 7 kids. My oldest is 20. My youngest is 4. We call them Team A and Team B. My Team A, my oldest kids, were all adopted, 2 from Ethiopia and 2 from Uganda. And then we had a long stretch of just raising them before I had a bunch of surprise pregnancies. So I am like launching, I've got 2 graduates graduating in just a short bit here. And I have a 4-year-old. So I've got a whole lot of crazy. And I think because of I tell my husband, I'm like, man, have the personality of someone who needs like 2 kids, 4 years apart in school. And I have 7 kids and they're all on top of each other and I homeschool. So a lot of the message of this book was me, over a series of seasons in my life going, I feel like my life is too much or it's not enough. And so how do I find him right here? And that's really what this book is, my own journey over decades of going, how do I find God when I can't get what I want and when my life feels too crazy, or when my life feels like I'm standing on the other side of a store window, looking inside at what I can't have. Where's God?
I love what you said a minute ago, because I think it will attach to some people who are listening. You said, I have the kind of personality where I should have 2 kids 4 years apart. Describe your personality, because I think that will give a window to why this message resonates.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a high introvert. I'm a reader. I like long stretches of time alone and quiet, and I'm really organized. And I have kids who lose their socks and shoes every other day. And that's not just my little kids, that's my teenagers too.
Teenagers sometimes are worse.
My goodness, you're telling me. I feel like I need to scour every lost and found of every youth group they've ever been to or their homeschool co-op, because we're missing forks and knives like nobody's business. So I just am I like order. I like quiet. I like reading and I like rest. And my life is really none of those things, my external life. But I think this is transferable even to the person who isn't wired that way. How many of us are living lives that don't match our personalities? And how do we go, where is God when he gives us a story that's different than maybe the one we think we really
Mm,
need to thrive?
that right there. Where is God when he gives us a story that's different than the one we think we need to thrive? That is amazing. I will never forget, and I wish I could quote it exactly, but I saved it as a quote in my Apple Mail, which I don't even use anymore, but it would let you choose signatures and then it would automatically rotate through them. And so one of the quotes that Sally Clarkson said was basically asking God for the grace to live within the boundaries that she was given. And
Oh,
I
that's
have
good.
held on to this because I can be so attracted, we all can be so attracted to the boundaries that other people are given. And it seems like things always go a certain way, or they get opportunity, or they haven't had to have the kind of challenges that we've had. And so while we're slogging through it, just trying to keep up and just keep our daily situations going, it's like, oh, are on a vacation yet again. That quote made me reckon with the fact, though, that my boundaries, not the ones I'm giving myself, but my God given boundaries for my safety and my security and my own flourishing is a gift. And so that is something I've thought of over the years, and I've told
Mm.
myself, your boundaries are a gift, Chrystal. Your boundaries are a gift. So when I saw your book, The Gift of Limitations, I was like, this is it. This is the thing.
Yeah.
So I would love to know what kind of, just practically speaking, I mean, obviously 7 kids, the reality of that, but what are the specific areas for you where you have felt limited, your limitations?
I mean, I think I've felt it when in my 20s, I struggled with infertility for a long stretch of time. And so I lived looking over the fence line at all these women who were having their babies, their first, second, third babies. And I thought we'd be just never there. But the irony is, some of the same feelings that came up then, 15 years later, and I feel like I have so many kids, I don't know what to do with
Mm,
myself. That interesting. I get what I want, and I'm having those same feelings of,
mm,
how come so and so can live their best life and I feel like I can barely keep up with the needs under my roof? So I think currently it really is the reality of really wanting to tend well to my kids' hearts and recognizing that that takes a whole lot and there's only one me. And on top of it, I love to write. It's what I come alive writing. And yet my main role and goal is here at home. And so what does it look like to have all those things on my plate and do them well? Well, I really am starting to realize I can't do all of them to the degree that I want to. So
mm.
what do I do
Yeah.
then?
So what are the things that you are choosing not to do right now because of the limitations of the season?
Man, these are the pain points. Like real time is I can't bring everybody a meal when they're sick. And I'm telling you, for women, that's a hard thing. Like I am going, Lord, who are the people in my life, the friends that you really want me to invest in? And what does it look like to say, I can't care for this person right now because I got to take care of the needs under my roof and know that that's just, I'm not going to be able to do it. I can't show up to my small group with my church every single week.
Yeah.
Like there are things that I feel like are really good and godly things that I am having to say no to in order to tend to the grass right underneath my feet. And that's hard.
Is that hard mainly, and it could be both, but is it hard mainly because you are the kind of person where that's kind of life-giving to you? And or is it hard because you feel like this is a part of maybe the culture that you've had in your family and even in your own heart for what is pleasing to God? Is it kind of a, you know, because some of the things in our lives, the boundaries are, I want to do it. And some of them are boundaries because I kind of feel guilty because I can't, or I feel bad because I can't.
Yeah, those 2 are maybe a little bit of both. I can think of the I wanna do it as I wanna take more trips with my husband, just the 2 of us. I wanna connect with my friends in different parts of the country more often. I wanna do those things and I can't. The other is more so, I'm just gonna be really raw. I think we set up paradigms in relationships where we feel like we are loved best when we're really needed. And it's an interesting dynamic. I'm coming off of, I have Lyme disease. So I'm also really navigating how to take care of my health. And I oftentimes learn after it's too late and I'm in a Lyme flare because I'm just so tired.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I'm realizing is, gosh, I feel bad when I can't be there for another friend, because sometimes I think I'm loved when I'm needed. What is it like if I can't serve? Like, what does that look like for relationships if I can't be the friend who's always showing up on the front door on the hard day? That's hard.
Yeah. Wow. The practice, though, if you have the knowledge that there is a gift in limitations, there is a gift in boundaries, it is good for me to have territory that is for this season. But you have the desire to be the good friend. You have the desire to be a good member of your church body. And whether ill-placed or not, you have the desire to love others and, be
Yeah.
needed in the process. What is the thing that you do? Well, I guess first I would say, what is the signal to you that you're living beyond your limits? And when you have to bring yourself back, the second question would be, what are you doing in your head to get yourself back into the boundaries God has given you? Because I think what we do in our head is more than half the battle. So
You're
how do you
right.
know when you
Gosh.
went past the fence? And what do you do to tell yourself it's time to go back in?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, I don't know. This is like a good dose of reality for me, that a lot of times my body has to tell me I've gone past the fence line. And it's interesting. I think of how when I was younger, my body would give me warning signs and I'd be super resentful and also kind of a little prideful. Like, I'm just going to overcome this. Forget it if I've had a headache 5 days in a row. Like, whereas now the older I get, the more I'm like, the Lord, my body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. God uses my body to teach me. And so I feel a little less resentful when I am super tired. I mean, with Lyme, it's like I get super fatigued. And then I'm like, oh, shoot, I should have watched that 3 days ago and known I said, and knew that I said yes to too much, So oftentimes my warning signs are my body telling me, girl, you got to slow down. You cannot say yes to all these things. And sometimes it's just too late, then I'm in bed. But I will say there's times too, the more that I am personally growing in self-awareness, the more I start to notice if I'm snapping at my husband or at my kids, I typically have said yes to too much. And there's something going on in my brain that I'm not having time to tend to because I got to go do the next thing. And I think, some of the way that I recalibrate is by acknowledging that, you said it, there's a whole world going on in our heads. I mean, experts will say we have 6,000 thoughts in a day. And I think as women and men, we need to give time to tend to this whole world of real estate that's happening up here. But if I am going, I don't have the time to realize when that friend said that actually really hurt. That's something I need to take to God. Or I'm actually feeling a low grade anxiety because of this kid's grades or because of this exchange that I had with my husband. But if I'm going, it's like I just keep pushing that down farther rather than going, oh, let me take a pause and say, what's going on underneath here, underneath my head? What's going on inside there that I can bring to God?
How will you teach your daughters this? So many women learn to pay attention to their bodies because their bodies start yelling.
Absolutely.
And it's not even, I mean, I say how you teach your girls, but really it's youth. It's youth and your body is talking, but you don't have to listen. You can kind of just keep going and
drink more caffeine.
Drink more caffeine. Just keep going. So how do you think I'm just thinking about, as a mom, my youngest is now 15. I've got 2 boys in college and, you never stop parenting them. So the girls are 28 and 32. And for every season that they go through, it's like, there's some wisdom I can share. Let me just tell you this and save you the trouble of figuring this out the hard way. But what's the messaging that you give your kids about cooperating with the boundaries that their body has?
I mean, I think some of it is said. There's a lot more that I hope they're watching that I'm not saying. But I think for my teenagers, we say a lot of times, I think it's a good time to just take a break. You seem pretty stressed right now, like giving them language. What feels comforting? Want to climb in the bath? want to go upstairs and play some music and just rest. I think we say that, but I do hope, my teenagers are watching real time. My little kids probably are not as aware of what's happening real time, but maybe in the back of their memory, they will see the times that I've been in bed because of my Lyme, that it's not a deeply resentful being in bed, but that mom's reading a book and needing to actually just recoup and rejuvenate. I am hopeful that my kids watch us say no, and say no, even though we struggle with our no's, but say no to really good things and see that that's part of how we're taking care of ourselves.
That's good. I mean, we know that people learn more from watching, showing than telling, but that's a good reminder. Looking through your book, chapter 5, The Myth of Dreaming with God. First of all, I loved the title of that. Talk to me about that, because I think we do so much to separate, or maybe we're taught to separate, like God, the verse that talks about God knowing the thoughts that he has towards us. And I don't think we give enough credence and credit to the cooperation that we get to have with God. So what is dreaming with God, and how does that fit into this idea of the gift of limitations?
Well, I think we are all dreamers. We are all full of dreams. And I think a lot of our dreams are perhaps our own dreams that we really lock into and think to ourselves, I've got to have this thing. And there is a dismantling that's happening in a lot of our lives where God is saying, maybe this dream might need to end so that I can give you my dream. I think of something in my life that it was a good and godly and right thing that I prayed for years. And if I said it to you, it's a little too personal to share here, but if I said it out loud, anybody would go, yes, go after that. That is so good and right. And I would wake up and intercede in the mornings. I would think about it as I'm falling asleep. And it wasn't until one particular morning where I had a little intersection with God, and just as I'm interceding again for this thing, had a sense, wait a second, maybe this isn't about this thing coming to fruition. Maybe it's about God wanting to reach me. And this thing that I interceded for never came to fruition. And I started to realize, in it not happening, underneath it all, some of the drive for my intercession and prayer and fortitude was actually, I was scared out of my mind. What's my life going to be like if this doesn't come to fruition? Who am I going to be? And I think that happens with a lot of our dreams, where it's maybe a little idea and then we get so locked in because we're scared. What if it doesn't happen? And I wonder if there isn't a grand undoing that God is doing in many of us, that where our dreams aren't actually coming to fruition because he wants to impart dreams that are really his, that are different. I mean, I don't know, Chrystal, I feel like at this stage of my life, it looks so different than what I thought it would. Doesn't yours?
Yes, it does.
God just gave you different dreams than you'd ever had for yourself at 30.
And I say that. I say God will always dream bigger dreams for your life than you will. I think the way I often look at it, though, is that I'm accepting his dream for me, as opposed to connecting with something that it's almost like, okay, God is good. And I think that's the way we frame it. God is good. So if this is in my life, if this is the next step, it's because he knows best. And that's true. But I think sometimes we leave on the table, because we're reckoning with our disappointment or the difference between our expectations, that maybe this is something where it can become my dream too. Does that make any sense? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like, I think
absolutely.
we can be so focused on obedience, and so focused on being grateful, and so focused on being content, and so focused on being trusting. Those are all good things that I may have left on the table. Is this something I could want?
Go after.
And go after. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting, because I think that part of the undoing in each one of us is, I think it actually creates a greater fortitude. It creates a greater passion. Like, I don't know. I feel like when I sit at the end of some dreams that are of my own that have really died, on the other side of that is passion. And I think it's a passion for what God has for me if I'm willing to step into it.
Yeah, that's so good.
Hey there. I am asked all the time, Chrystal, can I take you to coffee? Chrystal, do you have 15 minutes for me to ask you a question? Chrystal, I would love if I could just pick your brain. And if you don't know me by now, you'll learn soon enough. I would love to take everyone to coffee. One-on-one conversations are my fave. Unfortunately, I cannot. So what I've done is I've carved out some time in my schedule this year to host a coaching cohort. I've actually done one already this year for leaders. The next coaching cohort that I do will be for communicators. So if you are a speaker, a writer, a blogger, desirous of writing a book, a podcaster, or desirous of getting one started, this cohort is for you. There's just one caveat. There's only going to be 12 women in it. So what we do is we ask for those who are interested to apply, and then we go through and try to pick who would be the best group with me and with each other to go through a 90-day plus a few weeks experience with me. Very intimate, very close, and assuredly, very useful. So if you are interested in joining me for my next coaching cohort, this one for communicators, here's what you need to do. Make sure you are on my email list, crystalevanshurst.com. Right underneath my picture, you will see a space to put your name and email. What does that have to do with the coaching cohort, you ask? Well, I'm going to let my email list know the deets first. Here's what you need to know. Applications open May 16th and they close May 27th. We'll go through and pick the group that we think will be best suited for this cohort direction and best suited for each other. And then we'll notify those 12 who can actually then enter. But we want to know if you're interested, and we want to know what you'd love to learn, and we'd want to know what you want to learn from me. And then we will do our job to make sure we have the right group for this season. So coaching cohort, coffee if you'd like, this time for communicators. I'm excited to tell what I know, to go deep, and to make sure that you have what you need to maximize your message, to monetize your message, and to market your message in this world. All right, y'all, here we go. Let's get back to this great podcast about the gift of limitations.
You talk about the fence line, and we want a fence. We want to keep things out. We don't necessarily want a fence that keeps us in. How do you communicate your fence lines? I think a part of limitations is not just our willingness to abide by the boundary lines that we're given, but our willingness to communicate our boundary lines to other people. And so what does that look like?
Oh, that's hard.
You know, as you have to tell people what you're not going to do that you used to do, or what they want you to do.
Tough.
That seems like it's reasonable and easy, but it's not on the, like navigating the no is what we're talking about here.
For me personally, it's been the biggest, most important conversation has been the one I have in my head about my no. If I can talk to the Lord about this no and ask for his perspective in my no, because I do this thing when I say no to something, I could say it confidently, and then I spend days going, shoot. And am I a terrible friend? Am I a half-committed person? What was I thinking? But the more that I allow the voice of the Lord into my heart, like, Sarah, you are moving slow because I've given you a lot to take on in your life between your four walls. And I see you, and what you're doing is beautiful. The more I hear the words of the Lord over me, that the investment, that I am one person, not three, and I'm living out that one person life well, the more that I can not only say no, but then feel it in my heart, like, this really matters that I say yes to what God has given me and no to the things I can't. And honestly, I don't know. I feel like the older I get, the more I give people permission with my no. Like, they may hate it. I mean, I can think of friends who have been hurt by my no's, and I feel like they may hate them at the moment, but is that something that 5 years later they're going to remember? I can't believe she said no to that, but that actually gives me permission to say no so I can stay present with my own life. I'm around a lot of young moms because I have young kids.
Yeah.
And I'm watching myself, the younger version of me.
The frenzied version of you.
Yes. In my late 20s, early 30s, transitioning to the reality that I have kids and a full life, and I have to say no to things. And I'm watching that push and pull of I'm going to say yes to everything I think I can do until then, wait, I get burned out and I can't do it all. And it's actually helping me at this later stage go, the no's really matter because they mean that I get to say yes to the things that God really has put in front of me.
When you say no, because I just think everybody needs help with this.
Oh,
give me some
yes.
give me some of the ways you say no. Like I tell people, get a script ready. Like just have some go-to
That's so
no
smart.
statements. So what are some of the ways that you say no when you have to deliver a no? Like what comes out of your mouth?
I mean, I'm thinking of, we've been asked to host a handful of things at our house, and I love hospitality. It is like my thing. So I love when I get asked because I'm like, I want to do this. But my script would be, man, in this season of life, as we're navigating some more challenging things with the hearts under our roof, and I'm just trying to pace myself with my lime, it's probably not something I can do and do well. Like, I think of a friend told me recently, the number of times I hear you say, I have 7 kids, but I say that a lot because it's like, I have 7 kids. I'm probably not going to be able to be on the committee.
So, okay. So if somebody doesn't have 7 kids and we feel like it's a no for whatever reason, let's just say our body, but we don't want to go around saying all the time,
I'm sick or yes.
I'm tired. Right. Like there's always a reason I can't do something. What suggestions do you have for reasons that may or may not be accepted, but maybe a little palatable and maybe not always negative to something that may be true, right? That we can say no. Like one of the ways I know that a lot of married women will say no is, well, let me check with my husband. After checking with my husband, we just
that's
don't think,
good.
We'll do that one. But are there any other suggestions that you have?
You're saying like the elevator speech no, not necessarily the close friend who needs to really know why you're saying
any of the
no.
above. I'm just looking, as many examples as we can give the people, because so many women struggle with this doggone no.
I know. Well,
and
so
then we overextend.
Yes. And then we're so bone tired and we can't give the people we love the most what we really need. I think for me, I am always thinking of kind of helping give other people permission to say no when I'm saying no. So what if it is, gosh, I really need to invest in my husband right now. And life is so full. And if I'm out 5 nights a week or 4 nights a week, we got to connect. Or my kids are needing more mom FaceTime. I mean, that's maybe a little bit beyond the elevator speech. I think because I give people reasons because I'm like, then maybe they can use those reasons later. We don't have to be running around like chickens with our heads cut off. I write about in the book, I think we oftentimes try to be 3 people in one.
Yeah.
Like our current culture is so optimized that like, I really think I'm going to succeed at making dinner, listening to a podcast, texting a friend, and writing down notes as I'm thinking of them for homeschool the next day. Like there's no way we can't live like that. We can't live at that pace and think that our bodies and our hearts are actually going to survive. But if I lay out my responsibilities, many times I am doing the work of 3 women and I feel good about that until I don't anymore. What does it look like? I actually, one of the things I write about in the book is a productivity fast, where for a period of time, I just went, what if I vastly limit my task list and just see what happens to my heart, how I feel about myself, how I think God sees me, and what happens in my life. My most productive hours are between like 1 and 3 in the afternoon, because at that point in time, my big kids were even littler. So it was like rest time. And I would try and tackle 15 things during those 3 hours or 2 hours. And so I went on a productivity fast. And for that stretch of time, I would limit my list to maybe 3 or 4 things. And I would take a walk in the woods or read poetry or read my Bible, not for a quiet time, but just to be inspired, or read literature, do things that like very not 2024, or even when I did it, 2014, whenever I did. But then to start to notice, gosh, at first I felt really squirrely. Like, how does God see me? How do I see me? I like me better when I'm knocking it out of the park and doing it all. I like me better then. But what is it like to sit in a little bit of a lack of productivity and experience God's delight and me just being me. The more times I had that, the more I started to really feel like I can say no to other things and I'm not going to crumble, because God actually likes me just because I'm me, not because of all that I'm doing.
When you talked about laying out your responsibilities, what does it look like for you to get a handle on what you're engaged in? How do you do that? Is that a conversation with your husband? Do you literally write down? Do you look at your calendar? What does it look like for you to assess what's currently inside your fence?
I think at least probably once a year, we're sitting down and looking at our list and going, what's on the plate? What can be moved? More realistically, probably 3 or 4 times a year when we get away, that's what we do.
Okay.
What are things we can say yes and no to? But one of the benefits to having this many kids and having the life that we do is we have to have these conversations a lot more, because it's like every season, who's going to play soccer? Who's going to do lacrosse?
Right.
We are pretty
forced,
frequently talking
forced
about
organization.
Yes, we have to. We just have to.
Oh, so for you, once a quarter, at least, looking at the schedule and figuring out what should be on your plate. I actually think kids or no kids, 7 kids or 1, I think that's a good pacing, because different things happen in different seasons. And to say, what am I committing to, and what can my life actually hold? I love that you say this. God doesn't tiptoe around the minefields in our heads, nor does he charge through them dictatorially. In his walk through my mind, he dignifies me and my story and this moment. And then you go into he knows the history. Your language, first of all, is always so beautiful. He knows the history of what I think and feel, but it boils down to trust. And when I was reading this, I was thinking, you're describing this battle that's happening in your mind. You talked about the 6,000 thoughts, but that God can navigate that minefield, and that not only can you trust him with the outcome, you can trust him with the process of the wrestle. And I would love to talk to you a little bit about that. I think the hard part is not liking the fence, and maybe not wanting to say out loud to yourself or to God that you don't like the fence because you don't want to sound ungrateful.
Absolutely.
And so the wrestling that you've had, whether it's with your health or whether it's with the kids or whether it's with the schedule or whatever, what does it look like for you to wrestle with God about the boundaries that it seems as if he might even be imposing on you?
Yeah.
You've had to walk through this when, in the season of infertility, you're walking through this even now with your own health. What does it look like? Because right now we see the settled version. You know what I'm saying? There's a whole book about the gift of limitations, and Sarah's calm and gracious.
Figured it out.
Yeah. But I think what I loved about this was there are minefields in my mind. They are. And I can not only trust God with the outcome, I can trust him with the journey to get there. And then I don't have to hide the wrestle from him.
I think the wrestle is key. And I just want to give people permission. I think we resent our limitations a whole lot without ever naming them, because we really don't want to be that tantrumy 3-year-old.
Right.
And so we resent them. We don't name them. It comes out sideways, but we're not throwing a tantrum, at least. And I just want to give people permission that we can name our limitations, and that actually enters you into a beautiful wrestle with God. We kind of don't want to name them, because I don't want to go, I feel limited by 7 kids after all these years of infertility, right?
Right.
Or practically speaking, I think about, goodness, last year we were invited to go on this great couples trip. What a dream. And I looked at my life and went, there's no way we can do it. And I, honestly, to verbalize that, it sounds a little entitled. Like, who am I? I have the opportunity to go and I'm upset that I can't go. It's such a small problem in light of all the big problems. But you know what? These paper cuts, they actually impact our hearts. So if I don't name, this is hard, that my life is limited and I can't go on this trip, then I just bury it inside of me and I react to it. So some of our paper cuts actually need to be named. Have you heard the phrase death by 1,000 paper cuts? We sometimes just need to name. It's hard for me that I can't get anywhere on time. It's hard for me that I can't find a pair of match socks. It's hard for me that I can't connect with my girlfriends from college once a year like they might be able to because of my limitations. It's hard for me that I can't do the weekly group at our church because my body just can't handle too many activities right now. And to name those And then to actually give ourselves permission to grieve them. And I think grieving is very different than having a tantrum. Grieving is going, I would like this for this season of life, and I don't have it. And this is hard. And those are the conversations that I think God wants to have with us. We hear, he's near to the brokenhearted and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. And we think that's the thing I'm going to hold on to when someone in my life dies. I mean, you and I both know, having lost a parent, the grief, that kind of grief is profound and in your face and you can't get away from it. But we have little things in our lives that are hard that God is inviting us to grieve with him and saying, yeah, parts of your heart are broken over that. I want to sit with you and be near to you in it. But if we don't name it, we don't ever have that opportunity.
Mm. You say in that chapter where you talk about grief, surrender, which is one of my favorites. Surrender is the sigh of life. Beautiful. It's the moment, surely you have experienced it once or twice, when his Holy Spirit overshadows and you're able to say, not my will, but yours. It's the simplicity of letting go. Surrender gets a bad rap. Mainly because we think first about what we're giving up, what we want to do that we can't, where we want to go that we can't go right now, the person we want to be with that, we can't. And, it's looked at in that way. But, it's like the Garden of Eden. They had to surrender one tree to have the whole rest of the thing available to them.
So right.
And so then there are gifts in that. I know that right now your body is a big thing and obviously it should be, but the surrender of your time because of your body, the surrender of your time because of your children. I'm curious about what are the things that you have surrendered, because it's not seasonal. Like your children are seasonal, and I know they have a 4-year-old, so it's like a long season ahead, but in theory, what are some of the things that you've just released them? They're just released because for the foreseeable future, definitely while I'm battling this disease and definitely while I'm still raising children, I wanted it. My heart still pings about it a little bit and I've just surrendered it. And I may not ever have this back because, at some point you'll be able to bring somebody else a meal. At some point you'll be able to engage at some level in your church. Mm-hmm. But you just feel like this was supposed to be a part of my life, and I don't think it is.
Oh, goodness. I mean, those are the big pains, right? And we all have them. I think for me, I've had to surrender some real dreams about what I thought my family would look like. And that has been, and I think every parent goes through it to some degree. And nobody tells us that when our kids are young, that you're going to actually go through some of the most profound surrender. But it has been for me to accept that God has a different plan for what my family looks and feels like than what I thought. And I'm not talking about what I thought when I was 20. I'm talking about even what I thought when I was 30 and 35. Just acknowledging this is going to look different than what I thought. It's been one of the biggest invitations of God to for me to go, you have a way and it's different than what I thought. And I don't know that it's ever going to be what I thought it was. And so how do I open my hand and go, this is super hard to let go of what I thought it was going to be and receive that you've got a better way. And this is the tricky thing. I think sometimes with better, we think better is our version of better. Like better means bigger, more flashier, or tied up with a bow. And for me, it's been going, you're working angles in my heart that if I had the dream of what I thought this was going to look like, they wouldn't be worked. I wouldn't have that. So there's been that. I mean, I have, with the loss of my dad, the surrender of he will not grandparent my children. We will not have that experience. And that's a big loss to go that's not getting tied up. There's no answer to that I go, oh, well, that happened because of this. It's just a loss. And I think it's just a loss. And sitting in that, there are things in our life that will be just losses that we won't understand. But I think the freedom is I'm slowly at 46 going, I think his way is good. And I don't understand it. And it's painful, but I think it's good. And it's taken me a long time to even dip my toe in the water there.
I think it's good. It's kind of a, it's that Romans 8:28 working. It's like, okay, there's something good in it. There's something good in it. And having to tell
Yeah.
yourself that over and over again, for sure.
And tell yourself the testimony of when you've seen it is good. Like, I think it's been important for me to name my losses and name my limitations and look back. I think of with us having my 4-year-old was a total surprise. I mean, I was 42 when I got pregnant with her. And already like 2 days before, I was like, babe, I'm drowning. I can't possibly keep up with all the needs of my kids.
And
then
then
I find out I'm pregnant.
Surprise.
And now I look and I tell myself, I literally do tell myself the testimony. She is such a bright light in my world. And what would my world be like without her? And I thought she was going to drown us all. I thought there's no way our family could possibly take on another child. And she's been a total bright light. And so I got to tell myself, Lord, you gave me a limit, and it was her. And it was so good.
Inquiring minds want to know. So legit, when you found out you were pregnant again, what was your response?
I mean, we phrase this for her as we tell her she's our great surprise. I cried for 6 months. And I couldn't say that out loud. Here I am saying it on your podcast, but like, here's this woman who wanted kids all these years, and now she has her 7th, and she's like, I'm going to die. I think my Charlotte is actually probably the reason I wrote this book, because I'm like, at 25, my fence line was infertility. And at 45 or 42, my fence line was so many kids. And so I cried, and I knew enough to pray over myself as I'm crying, let this baby never receive this. But then I grieved. But then I turned a corner about 6 months into my pregnancy where I started to believe you've got a better story for me. Mm-hmm. And now, I mean, if I brought her here now, she is a full head of curls, and she's so spicy, and everybody loves her. And so it's easy for me to tell that story because I look back and I'm like, I did grieve this limitation, and surely she has limited me. I mean, at my age, having a baby or having a 4-year-old is no joke, but it's been the best limit.
I love that. You cried for 6 months. Because I think,
and I'm not exaggerating.
No, but I think that's the thing. I think this is the part we lose. You ask somebody or you see someone struggling through something, and you say to them, don't worry, it'll pass. I was there. You're going to make it. And in your shoes, you're thinking, you don't know how hard this is. And you seem, it's like the syndrome when you're in the mall with your kids, and then the older women pass by and they're like, enjoy these years. They're going to go by so fast. This is just the sweetest, but you're in it. You're in it.
Yeah.
And so I just think, the ability to say, hey, while I'm in it, while I'm asking the Lord to help me with all the things, I'm crying about it. I'm surrendering to it, but I'm crying about it. I can see the good in it, but I'm struggling to accept it, and just acknowledging that, because I think the trouble comes when we don't acknowledge it. So now, on top of dealing with the boundary, we're dealing with all the emotions that are raging that we're not acknowledging.
And we skip steps. I mean, how many times have I coached myself into thinking the right way and missed a whole process that God wanted for me to grieve? Because I think as Christians, a lot of times we're afraid of grief because we're afraid it's going to totally consume us, and we're going to be Eeyore and never be able to catch our breath again. But I mean, if you're healthy, like sit in grief for a little while with God, with His Word. I mean, every time I've done that, I come out the other side like the air is clear. It's different than when I just feel a little bit of anger and stuff it back down. Like if I give myself permission to grieve something, and that's what I did in that 6 months. I was like, God, you're big enough to handle me crying it out for 6 months. Like, you're not going to take this baby away from me. You're not going to like chastise me for crying over a beautiful God-given gift. I felt like he actually met me in my grief pretty profoundly, such that when she came, I was like, I'm ready to receive. You got something good for me here.
In the chapter where you talk about living present, one, I love this statement. My ability to be present to a certain moment is a helpful gauge for my heart. And you talked about the clearing of the cache. It's back to the thoughts, bringing your thoughts in alignment. His word with the decluttered mind. This idea of being present and practicing presence. People are talking about it all the time. How do you practically do that? Because part of being willing to accept the gift of limitations is paying attention to what's inside your fence. And like, instead of looking at what's outside, paying attention to what's inside. What does that look like for you to practice living present? And I know that you talked earlier about not being well and, having to lay down and those kinds of things. But if it's not tied to your physical well-being in relationship to the challenge that you have right now, being present and having a mind that's not cluttered. What are some of the rhythms that you either have used or know that have worked even for some other people in your life? If you want to just share some of those practical things with us here.
I mean, I do think being present is a byproduct of being able to name our limitations and grieve them with God. I think a byproduct is we start to be more present, but there's also things I do very practically. Like my little secret is I have 2 phones. I have one phone and I say this for teenage parents, not that I think that this is the best solution. There surely has to be another better solution than buying more technology to cure your technology. But I haven't figured it out. So maybe someone can contact me and tell me. But I would try and put my phone away. But when you have teenagers and they're driving, you can't do that. Like how many times did I literally multiple times, Mom, I was a flat tire on the side of the road and I couldn't reach you because you were spending time being present. So I got myself a second phone, and I have a phone that is just my teenager's phone, and I can take pictures and I can use it as a timer on the stove. And I keep that with me most of the day. And I treat my other phone like it's a computer. And I have times that I actually pick it up and react to it, relate to it like it's a computer, but I have less. I mean, that's been massive for my mind clearing. That's just been very significant for me to be able to be present with what's right in front of me. I also practice something called the daily office, where I am 3 times a day checking in 7 minutes. I mean, in the morning, it's much longer, but mid-afternoon, 7 minutes, 2 minutes of quiet. And I don't even know if I actually probably shouldn't even call it the daily office because I don't know if this is exactly how it's intended to be, but I take 2 minutes of quiet. I read something from the word, sit in it for 5 minutes, and then 2 more minutes of quiet. It's very simple, but I have found that if I can give a couple minutes of my day to being self-aware and sitting with God, it clears the cache. Because I got all these thoughts that are happening in me from the 3 hours beforehand that if I don't give them permission to come up and out before God, they just keep bubbling over. So that's been a significant thing too.
That's good. That's good. And here, the friend that told me about the daily office, when she told me about it, it was an app. So twice, you're the third person, the second person in the last month to talk about that. But the person before you was talking about it, and I was like, but he kept talking about putting his phone away. I was like, well, how do you do that if you don't have the app? He was like, no, it's not an app. I was like, it's a thing that maybe somebody created an app for. But I was like, how do you do that without the app?
I think someone probably created an app for it. Yeah.
They created an app for it. They created an app for everything, which is why we have the problem that we have of settling down. If there's one thing that you would want someone to hear today that knows that they need the gift of limits because they are feeling overwhelmed, they are snapping, they are tired, their body's been talking to them. And as we talked about that, they resonated with that. They didn't want to, but they did. If there's one thing you want to hear the person who needs to explore the possibility that limitations are actually gifts, what would you say to them as we close?
I think I would say give yourself a little bit of time, and it doesn't have to be more than 10 minutes. Maybe just 3 minutes a day for a couple of days to start to name those limitations. And I think when you start to name them, they stop having this residual power over you, like you're resenting them all the time. I actually think you can enter in to a journey with God about those and about how you really feel about them. And they may not be as powerfully limiting as you think if you can name them and start to grieve them with God.
That's so good. Thanks so much for joining me, Sara. This was great.
Thank you.
You had another beautiful book written in between the 7 kids. When do you write? Inquiring minds want to know, when do you write?
I do. I've done it. You probably are similar. I've done it different with every book because kids are in different stages, right? I write sometimes in the afternoons, but that's really hard for me to just dive in for like an hour at a time. This book, I spent several weekends away at a hotel or a friend's beach house and just wrote for long stretches. I'm finding my capacity I have much less capacity to dive in for 40 minutes and write. I need a long stretch.
Yeah, that's good. Well, glad you took the stretches. It's beautiful and a beautiful message yet again. So thanks for joining me, Sara.
Thanks, Chrystal.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sara. She's such a wise woman. And if you need more on this principle of the limitations that you have and the gift from accepting them, you want to make sure you pick up her book, The Gift of Limitations, and you can get that anywhere books are sold. But here's where I want to just stick a pin in it for you. You will be better off by recognizing that you have limits. And I know that we don't have time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that. But I want you to know that it's when you accept that you're able to better prioritize and decide what comes first. It will not all fit in. Someone wise once said that they got really clear about their goals when they realized that there were some things on their list that they would never do. You're not going to get to it all. Once you reckon with that truth, that you're not going to get to it all, now we can start talking about making decisions. Which things are we going to make sure we get to? The reality is, whether you move on into eternity at the age of 22, or if you're 92 or 102 even, there will be some things you didn't get to. The world is too big. The lists are too long. The opportunities are too great. And we can do a lot, but we can't do everything. And learning to live within your limitations forces you to choose. If you just got here, you may not have heard me say this in a while. If you've been around, you know I say this all the time. Here is one of the greatest gifts in you living well. You get to choose. Hope this was helpful. See you next time.